The Edmonton Oilers won their 12th of the last 15 games tonight against the Ottawa Senators. The Oilers are proving themselves to be bona fide Stanley Cup contenders on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, where you can enjoy the NFL season with a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, the Ottawa win, the San Jose win, and why the Oilers can do this. So, anytime you're in a back-to-back situation over a weekend, you're definitely going to be worried about your workload, your usage. You want to give these guys a reasonable chance. You know, you play a little earlier in the day on Saturday, you play close to your normal start time on Sunday night, but you have some decisions to manage. You have some personnel decisions, how you want to split your goalies. You know, Pickard went Saturday, Skinner went Sunday. Both goalies were pretty much fine in their respective work, but this one in particular against Ottawa, nothing special, nothing fancy, but what I found encouraging for the Oilers is that they're starting to get that next crop or wave of offense to come for them. You know, for a good 6 weeks to start this season, that offense was a real issue. You know, they were scoring 2.2 goals per game through their first 10. That was a combination of things. The power play in particular really struggled that first few weeks of the season, but sitting here now, my big goal, if you will, for the Oilers is continuing to add wrinkles to their game. You know, the elements, components, whatever verbiage you want to use, keep adding elements of your game that is going to continue to make you unpredictable and more difficult to play against. You know, you think about this in terms of the other sports, it's a little more linear. You know, if you're playing a good basketball team and they shoot a lot of threes, you're going to close out more. You're going to be more aggressive about trying to not lose that extra pass that sets up the wide open three. You know, if you're playing a really good wide receiver in football, you're going to shade safety help to that side of the field. If you're playing baseball and you're facing a really good hitter, you're going to throw him non-competitive pitches. You're going to throw him pitches that are close, but you're not really going to give him anything to hit. But in hockey, your tendencies, your habits, that's really what the other team is going to cue in on. You know, if you enter the zone with speed a lot, they're going to make a concerted effort to try and intercept you earlier in the neutral zone so you can't build up speed. Or if you're a dump and chase team, they are going to have that first outlet pass when you are trying to get your forecheck established. That first outlet pass is probably going to be a lot shorter. But tonight, what encouraged me, that 2 of the 3 Oiler goals come off of forecheck and pressure. You know, the first goal, McDavid does the hard work there. McDavid wins 2 separate board battles against multiple Senators. He wins that puck and he finds Arvidsson, who's leaking back down the middle. And the Oilers have had a weird go of it as far as finding homes for Skinner and Arvidsson this season. Arvidsson's played almost all of his minutes with Draisaitl this year, but being that Podkolzin, Draisaitl, and Kasperi-Kapanen have functioned so well as a trio together, the Oilers don't want to break that up, which I understand. And riding the hot hand until it stops working is perfectly fine. It's perfectly acceptable. Frankly, I would be surprised if that wasn't the case for the Oilers, if they didn't keep riding the hot hand with that trio, because when you're a hockey coach, so much of what you do comes down to managing on feel. There is not a consistent, well, if they do this, we do that. If we do that, we do this. It doesn't work as linearly as it does in the other sports when you're hunting for matchups or looking for certain situations. In hockey, it's a lot more fluid and hard matching as far as getting certain guys on the ice out there against the other teams, certain players in certain situations. Things like deployment, where do you want them in terms of zone starts on the fly? Do you want them offensive, defensive zone? All of that is part of that that process if you're a coach. And in a game like this against Ottawa, you get Arvidsson back in the lineup yesterday. He looked okay, and they're still going to need to find what his ideal deployment is, because I don't know if it's playing with Hyman and McDavid, because what makes that line work at 5-on-5 is McDavid's speed through the neutral zone always pulls people towards him, and it opens up space for Hyman, and in this case, Arvidsson, and that's what happens. So much of that Ottawa defense is shaded towards that left side of the ice where McDavid's trying to win that loose puck, that Arvidsson's able to walk right down the middle, right down Broadway to attack the net, and you want to put Arvidsson in a position where you can capitalize on his skill sets. He's an above average shooter. He's okay on the forecheck, but he's undersized. He's not the most physical player. And I don't necessarily know if he complements what McDavid and Hyman do well. He did tonight. I think that's something that's worth monitoring. I'll be very curious to see what the Oilers ultimately decide to do with Arvidsson this season, because obviously things haven't gone as planned for him and for Jeff Skinner, for that matter. These are both priority free agents. They signed relatively early at the opening of free agency, and they haven't really had the success that either was expecting. Skinner is playing almost 2 full minutes less per game than he did last year. Arvidsson is really struggling to find the stat sheet. So there are things to consider here. I am encouraged that Arvidsson got on the sheet tonight. I think we can talk about it on the Adam Henrique goal too. Back to our bigger point about having multiple ways to score. The Oilers adding that wrinkle. And look, Ottawa did not play a great game, especially in their own zone. I felt the Oilers did a really good job in terms of keeping up the pressure, mounting a forecheck, and really forcing Ottawa to actively play defense. And that's really one of the keys for me as far as what I would define as a good game from the Oilers. I want to see them force the other team to actively play defense, meaning get the puck in below their goal line, make their defensemen turn their backs to you, recover the puck, and try and break out. Then, as they're trying to break out, step up, make a play on the puck, and force those players to move the puck before they're ready to. And that's where you can really take advantage. And it's what the Oilers did a really nice job of in this game. I was very impressed, even though the Senators had more of the scoring chances. The Oilers ended up with more of the shots on goal because the Oilers were able to drive the puck. They were able to get some danger. And most importantly, they were able to get out to a lead. We talk about it all the time here on Locked On Oilers, but if you're an everydayer, I've been pounding the drum all year that the Oilers, when they get to play with a lead, are at their most dangerous, because that's where they can really get to transition. I'm looking at it right now. The Oilers are 12-2-2 this season when scoring first in games, and I felt they did a really nice job of getting out to that lead. And frankly, I don't want to get on Bouchard too much in a win, but the turnover that leads to the Nick Cousins goal, he's doing too much. I don't want to rag on a guy, but especially someone who's as good as Bouchard, because he's in that position because he has the gravitas, the leeway to make that type of play. You're not going to. Chris Knobloch said this a few weeks ago, actually. I believe he was talking about Bouchard. He might have been talking about Draisaitl or McDavid. I forget, but he was talking about that. If you're a great player, you're going to turn the puck over a lot just because you have the puck so much, and that you have to be creative. And part of being creative as a player is being willing to take risks. And creative players are going to turn the puck over. They are going to make mistakes. So you have to live with that as far as the Bouchard turnover. But the Oilers win this game, and in relatively convincing fashion. You didn't give up a whole lot. You played good defense. And most importantly, you got out of there with a win. We're going to take our first break of today's show. When we come back, we'll hit the Sharks game, and then the final segment, we'll talk about why things are starting to come together for the Oilers in the big picture, and the strongest argument yet as to why they are bona fide, if not the Stanley Cup favorites. Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your other favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. When your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. With hockey on break for the holidays, there's a whole lot of football this week. You've got the Packers and the Saints. You could do something like Jordan Love over 1.5 passing touchdowns. You could do something like Juwan Johnson over half a touchdown. So much more. All of that is over at PrizePicks, and download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks. Run your game. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers ahead of the holidays. I know everybody is a bit overstressed, a bit overworked. Enjoy this time. Put that time in with your family, man. It's one of those things that we all want to do a better job of. We always tell ourselves we need to do, but actually take the time. Put that time in and appreciate it. The holidays are a good time to take stock of things in your life and make you reflect and what you need to work on and what you're happy about, what you're happy with, what you're proud of. Enjoy the time this week. Get in a good reset, because this week's going to go very fast and very quickly. We are all going to be back to that grind next week. So take the time for what you will. We'll have daily episodes for you through the break. We'll do some more observational and some case study type episodes with no games. But as far as the win against the Sharks, you obviously don't want to be going to overtime against bad teams. I think that goes without saying, that the Oilers let the Sharks hang around in that game far too long. They gave them opportunities. But the one thing I will say in defense of the Oilers, you are not always going to have your best game. Last Thursday against the Bruins, Oilers didn't play that well. The Oilers dragged themselves back into that game. They got it to 2-1. They got it to 2-2, and they were able to put it away in overtime. But when you consistently can find ways to pull games out of nowhere, to hang around, to just keep plugging away. I said it last week in regards to the win against the Bruins, and I'll say it again now in regards to the win against the Sharks. Just keep digging. McDavid is I don't want to say a mercurial figure, but he has a weird reputation because of his persona and how he carries himself, because he's so hyper-focused, because he doesn't do a lot of extraneous stuff. He's perceived as being boring or just hyper-intense. And I think you don't understand how hard it is to be as good as he is. Like, of course, there's a talent element to that. That's undeniable. But when you have that level of talent, you have a personal responsibility to utilize it to your fullest effect, to do everything you possibly can. And that win was the win against the Sharks was a real, okay, they had maybe a C-, C+ game tonight. And they had a majority of the scoring chances. They controlled play. They won the high danger battle. They won the expected goals battle. But the Sharks are a plucky and competitive team. They are starting to try and make progress in their development cycle and their building cycle. Celebrini is a real treat to watch. He's one of the most high motor young players I've ever seen. And it's interesting to watch high skill players like that who also have that pest motor. And someone like Celebrini, being as young as he is and having that real tenacity to his game and that he just doesn't stop moving. He's very active. He's very noticeable. And being noticeable isn't necessarily a good thing. You can be noticeable in a bad way. You know, a lot of defensemen in the NHL are noticeable in bad ways, but Celebrini, he's very active. He doesn't stop moving. He's not a passenger. You know, we talk a lot about young players being passengers, watching the puck, waiting for the play to come to them. And Celebrini, he's in the mix for a young guy. You know, you think about the physical development of an 18-year-old, and he's got to put on, you know, another 10, 20 pounds. He's going to probably fill out his frame a little bit more, and that's going to put him in a great position to play a long time at a really high level. But that real effort is hard to overlook. And I think when you have a young player like that who clearly gets it and wants to be a difference, that's infectious. And the Sharks are not a good team. You know, they are paying a lot of veterans a lot of money to be there, to be not enforcers, but to be standard bearers. You know, that's why you go get Alex Wenberg. That's why you get Tyler Toffoli. It's why you get Barclay Goodrow. You have those guys around you so that the young guys can lean on you. They can believe in you. And I feel that the Oilers finding a way to finally get themselves one at 6-on-5, that's the type of game you point to as your proof of concept. You know, your elevator pitch is, we were having a really hard time. We couldn't get one past their goalie. Their goalie was having a good night. We are a talented team, but sometimes the puck just doesn't want to go in the net. And lo and behold, the Oilers found themselves a way to win a game that was challenging, that was difficult. And when you are in a position where things aren't going your way, and you can still find a way to win the game, that is a really, really strong endorsement of what you could potentially do. You know, Ekholm is having a really good season for a defensive defenseman. Obviously, you don't expect him to contribute a whole lot offensively because that's never been his game. But the simple matter of the fact is he's probably going to end up doing some real damage in terms of his career highs in certain statistics. You know, prior to this year, his career high in goals was 11. That was last year. He's at 5 right now through 33 games. He's almost halfway there, but well ahead of his previous pace. He set a career high in shots last year as well at 361. He's almost at 180, 280. He's a little he's about halfway to his shots on goal total. He's a little bit over his shots on goal total halfway mark from last year through 33 games. So he's shooting a little bit more. So it's not a surprise he's going to end up with more goals if, in theory, if you shoot more and you keep your career percentages. But then you get to OT, and this is the greatest show on turf. When you get Leon Connor and Bouch out there in the 3-on-3, good luck. It's really that simple. There is not another team in the entire NHL that can match that firepower. And I know there are Avalanche people who will bang the drum and say McKinnon and then Rantanen, because Rantanen's better defensively than Draisaitl and Makar's better than Bouch. That's great. I'll take 97, 29, and 2 every single time. This is the best 3-man unit in the sport. I think there's no better endorsement for the format than that group, than McDavid, Draisaitl, and Bouch, because of how well they play off of each other. I am highly encouraged by the simple fact that this group is finding ways to win in different styles of games, whether it's high scoring, whether it's low scoring, when they play well, when they don't play well, when they're not beating a bad goalie, when they're beating a bad goalie. They are continuing to find ways. And when you can continue to find ways against different calibers of opponents in different situations, that is a really strong proof of concept for what you could be. We're going to take our final break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers, and when we come back, we're going to talk about why everything's starting to come into focus for Edmonton. Coming up next, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. Not only can you bet on the game, but FanDuel also has props for players who score touchdowns, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Tonight, Saints-Packers on Monday Night Football. The Packers 14.5-point home favorites up at Lambeau on Christmas Day. Two really good games. Mahomes and the Chiefs heading to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers, where the Steelers are 2.5-point favorites. And then Wednesday afternoon, Ravens at the Texans, where the Texans are 3.5-point home underdogs. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers, where it feels like it came together very quickly for the Oil. And a month ago, I was a little more skeptical. I definitely was late in believing, and you can, if you've been listening every day, you have watched the evolution of my opinion of this team take shape. And I was very weary of the shape the team was taking through the first month and a half or so of this season. It didn't feel like progress was being made. And I've said this, if you've listened every day or close to every day, you have heard me make the gesture. If you're watching on YouTube, you've seen me make the gesture of how high you need to get to win the whole thing. And part of getting there is over the course of the season, incrementally improving in different areas. And the Oilers are starting to do that, you know. They're getting the power play going after what was a really rough first month. The penalty kill has been great the last few weeks and has really started to make progress. The penalty kill was the biggest inhibitor of team success that first month of the season. They conceded 11 power play goals on 29 opportunities through those first 10 games. And that was unsustainable from a it's just not possible to be this bad perspective. But the Oilers, when they're at their best, are really good in all three phases of the game. You know, they've consistently over the last handful of seasons, when they've been at their best, they're winning in all of these situations. They're winning at 5-on-5. They're winning on the power play. They're winning on the penalty kill. So you've gotten the special team straightened out, and that's encouraging. You've got Draisaitl playing the best defense of his career. I would argue he should probably be the Hart Trophy frontrunner right now. That'll probably be an episode later in the week, making the case, you know, if I were Leon's lawyer, as to why he should win the Hart Trophy. But you got Leon playing elite defense. You have him playing at a really high level with Vasily Podkolzin and with Kasperi Kapanen. That has given you some lineup flexibility now. You have the option of, well, maybe we play Arvidsson with McDavid. Maybe we try Skinner again. Or we play Skinner with Connor Brown and Adam Henrique. We bump Janmark down to the fourth line, and maybe we try that. But you stumbling into Kapanen and him clicking really well with Draisaitl, that's a plus. You know, Podkolzin clicking really well with Draisaitl, that's a plus. That's not something you were banking on or expecting coming into this season. Then the other part of this, you've gotten the defense to stabilize as well. You have to feel well. You have to feel pretty good about the improvements you've seen from Darnell Nurse over the last handful of weeks, from Troy Stetcher, from Ty Emberson, and Brett Kulak playing more minutes than he has historically and playing important minutes. And you've gotten discernible improvement in multiple phases of your team, the penalty kill, the defense, and I would even say the goaltending. And look, the Oilers are never winning anything just on their goaltending, but Stu gave you a great game last Thursday against the Bruins. He kept you in that game. You hung around long enough to get back in, and then you won in overtime. You get league average or better goaltending with the special teams working, with the power play working, with the kill working, with the team at large working. And this is where it starts to be fun. Because it doesn't become, oh no, who's going to score tonight? It becomes who's going to score tonight in a positive and affirmative manner. Because the Oilers are proving that even if on paper this group isn't as maybe proven for lack of a better word, as some of their previous iterations or maybe some of the other teams at large in the NHL. They at the very least are showing the potential that if you can get the Henrique goal and you can get the Derek Ryan goal and you can get the Podkolzin goal and you can get the Kapanen goal and the Hymans and the McDavids and then the occasional Ekholm and then you get a Nurse in there and really start to show the potential for this group. And it's so early on, we're not even at Christmas yet. The Christmas break, yes, but there is still a lot of hockey to be played this year. But the point being, and the main point, is that the Oilers are showing incremental progress, that you are having these touchstone games where you pull off a comeback against the Bruins, you win an OT, you play a back-to-back over the weekends. Not great teams, Sharks and Ottawa, but you beat them. You won both those games, and that's all against the backdrop of losing that game to Florida the way you did last Monday, where you had a 4-2 lead, and then you let Florida score 4 straight goals. It was really disheartening and flattening that the Oilers lost their winning streak, that it was to a team that they have a history with, lose to them in the Cup final, lose the way you did last Monday. I want to say this now. The league is as wide open as it's probably ever been. I don't think any team is particularly good right now. And when I say that, I mean that in the terms of Stanley Cup good. And part of the season coming together is that incremental progress we talked about. By February, March, I think some of these teams that are on the cusp of being real contenders will continue to improve to the point that I feel better about them. But sitting here right now in late December, I don't feel particularly strongly about any team in the NHL as being the best team. And I think that favors where the Oilers are at. And they had a really rough start to the season. They have since started to make progress, improve, find ways to win games, different types of opponents, different types of games. They have the best player in the world. They have one of the 5 best players in the world in Draisaitl. And I would venture to say Evan Bouchard's probably having like a B-, C+ version of himself season so far. And the Oilers are still finding ways to win games. There's a world where Bouchard really locks in and starts to put together performances like we saw in the playoffs last year. And that raises the ceiling of this team. Or Skinner rattles off, 5-6 games of 9-10, 9-15 goaltending. That's another level that can be unlocked. You still have the McDavid supernova game on the horizon where I'm sure he will have 6 or 7 points and the Oilers will win handily against an underhanded team. The recipe for the Oilers is here. They have played really good hockey over the last month or so, and if they can keep putting together wins, if they can keep finding ways to win, they are going to have a really, really magical season, because that's one of those components. To put it all together, it starts early, and they've already shown the ability to withstand some adversity. They've had some injuries, Hyman, McDavid, Nurse, they've had guys miss games. Now it's about how good can we get so that when we add players at the trade deadline, we can be even better. But that'll do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I want to thank everyone who listened to today's show. If you could be so kind, please subscribe on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, sorry, words are hard. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell, get a notification whenever new content goes live. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.